congressional district maps that are here. They also want to have an opportunity to give a presentation on how that's going to work and how we can all be engaged. But I'll formally get started. I'm Senator Leah Landrum Taylor. I represent Legislative District 16. Thank you, Ruben. And I want to introduce my seatmates as well that are here. We have Representative Ruben Gallego and Representative Catherine Miranda that have joined us this evening. There's three of us that represent this district, and certainly as we look at what's going on with the maps, it has a strong importance to us all and what's going to be happening. We know that 10 years ago, there was the big push as far as census, and then 10 years currently came around again. And there's a couple of important things with the census that we always want to be aware of. First of all, federal dollars and funding. That's why they want to make sure you're getting out there and you're counting the numbers and little beans and everything else we need to do, getting everything put in the jar. So we want to make sure that that's together. But another important thing is, what in the world are our district lines going to look like for the next 10 years? So, I can't help but think about some old battle wounds of sorts 10 years ago when we were right there engaged in the process, and seeing just how interesting that whole procedure came about. There were a lot of different ideas as far as creating what's being called competitive districts. That's a big word, that you'll start hearing a lot of people talk about competitive districts and the importance of it. What in the world does that all mean? And I know 10 years ago that was the big push. And we were saying, yeah, we want to make sure to have that. But what happened was there was a lot of things that came forward that we just were not satisfied with. There's some key things that I think we really want to look at when we're talking about creating our districts. And one of them is making sure that you have community of interest that are there, that are involved, that are invested in the process, and certainly will not lose out in the long run. So I'll talk a little bit more about that, but for right now I want to go ahead and introduce Jose Rivera from Congressman Pastor's office. He's going to talk about the congressional lines. So I thought it was important. We're going to talk about the legislative districts, but let's go and start with Congress.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you today. It was a little short notice as far as my getting on the agenda, but I wanted to make sure that I showed you guys, talk to you guys a little bit about the congressional side of things and how that process works and how to best advocate for the communities of interest that you're in and are important to you. So there's 4 basic guidelines you have to follow when it comes to federal maps, congressional maps. One is having equal population in mind. Then you have to have contiguous maps. What that means is that you can't have one area right here and then jump all the way across the state and say these 2 areas are the same district. You have to have that as compact as you possibly can. That's the best thing to keep in mind. And number 3, having in mind the natural boundaries, such as mountains, rivers, those kinds of things. Trying not to split those as much as possible. You have to have a very good reason to do something like that. And then 4th, and most importantly to us, is the Voting Rights Act, which has to do with communities of interest. Now that's a broad term in general because it doesn't just mean a particular voting history, but it goes into ethnicity, it goes into school districts, it goes into a wide range of things. So you have to keep that in mind when you identify what is my community of interest. And this is true of the statewide maps as well, but I'll let the legislative folks talk about that. And in determining that, 10 years ago they started the Independent Redistricting Commission, which their focus was to create congressional and state legislative maps for every census. After every census happened and the data came in, you made the maps based off of those population shifts to how to best allocate resources for our communities. And at the end of the day, that's what this exercise is all about, is how can government better serve its population. And you have to pay attention to the population shifts, and like Leah was mentioning, Senator Landrum was saying, you have to pay attention to how that is going to impact your community as far as federal dollars, as far as how resources are going to be allocated to education, and et cetera, transportation dollars, that type of thing. So that's why it's so important not to just focus on just the lines, but all the way to the end of this process. How to best advocate for the community at the end of the day. What's going to help us to best empower ourselves and improve our communities. So, in looking at that, folks have always talked about competitive districts and minority majority. I think it's doable to possibly do both, but never at the detriment to our own communities. I think that's the biggest thing to remember. So we can't just sell out our own communities in order to reach some ideal. And competitive districts are a very good idea, I think, but the reality is we have to take care of our own communities at the end of the day, because who else will? Nobody else will, we don't. So we have to pay attention to that. And so for us, the most important thing is the Arizona Redistricting Commission is allowing us to have public meetings and folks to have public input. So you're going to have an opportunity to go up and speak on behalf of whatever community you want to create and what you think should happen as far as this whole process is concerned. Arizona is one of 9 states that have to submit their maps to the Department of Justice. And this is a key point because at the end of the day, the Redistricting Commission will provide a map, but it's the Department of Justice ultimately has a say. If they find that we violated a law, the commission violated a law, they did not protect the Voting Rights Act in the creation of their map, what's going to end up happening is the DOJ will make it for us. And so I know that the commissioners are trying as much as they can not to be in that situation, but they can easily find themselves in that. And so it's your job, it's our job to inform the commissioners and everyone involved in this process what these maps should possibly look like. And so I want to get your input. I wanted to show you guys something that we think might work as far as our communities. If you look at the population shifts, if you look at what's happened over the past 10 years, and I think it allows us the best possibility to advocate for our communities. And I just wanted to kind of give you an opportunity to take a look at that. I knew this meeting was already going to take place. We already had a group of folks with their redistricting caps on, so might as well let's do a little challenge, look at congressional too. So I guess I'll show you the maps unless there's any other thing that I need to address. I'll move this closer to the middle. I'll do my best. Drum roll. I just have a couple of maps, and this is pretty much just our area. So, I don't know if you can really see this. I can walk around with it if you'd like. So, if you think about it, Congressional District 4 actually lost about 30,000 people. So, that would mean you'd have to expand. But
you didn't gain this faster.
okay, so now the Redistricting Commission is going to start from scratch. So they're going to look at a grid map and then start creating an equal population. And their goal is to create fair districts. But you also, again, you have to keep in mind communities of interest are important, so they're not just going to fall in certain squares real nicely and compactly. But if you look at the population shifts, and if I had an opportunity to show you, like, I have on a flash drive that shows actual population colors and kind of does a color scheme of that. But you have South Phoenix right here in Guadalupe and Laveen. You have the river bottom right here, and you have South Mountain right here as a border. So that's a natural border right there. And you have, you can think of the school district. I do have a flash drive. I'd have to set it up in the back, but for now I can show you this. I don't know what the time situation is, so I don't want to be respectful of that. Maybe in the meantime I can work on that if anybody wants to stay and look at that. But this is a map that we think would work out. We have 50% minority population here. And so the Department of Justice and federal precedent has already said that if you have a 50% plus minority, 18 years of age district, that map has to be created. It's considered a Bartlett district because of the decision that has been brought down in the past 10 years. So this is a Bartlett district. I mean, this area kind of has to be created. Some areas in the sites might be tweaked or whatever, but at the end of the day, we have Tolleson over here, South Glendale, or Old Glendale, and you have Central Phoenix, partially Isaac, Cartwright, Maryville, and you have the historic neighborhoods. Now, this is an important thing to consider because you can arbitrarily split these things just to reach certain partisan numbers, but then you'd be splitting historic districts, and you have to keep those districts in mind. And that's where some of these boundaries are. This is a map that was drawn up, and I'd like to get your input on that if anyone has anything to say about it.
Just a question, is that a congressional district that you put together there?
This is a congressional district, and the number that must be reached, you have one new seat. We missed the second seat by about 110,000, something like that. With over 100,000, so we barely missed having two new seats. We have to reach 710,224. That's the magic number. As far as that number will be created at the end of the day. So I'll go around and show this map here. This is, I think you guys have a real good look at it here. And so this is, again, South Phoenix, Levine. And then you see the I-17, I-10. There's a lot of population in that area that pretty much gravitate. I have statistics. This would be a new map. This is like kind of a, if you look at population shifts and just...
So this is what you're incorporating all these into this district?
Yes. And the congressional map's a little bit, encompasses a little bit more than the legislative map would, just because there's 30 districts that have to be created on a legislative map. And on a congressional map, you have to create 9. So it's by far a lot less. So as far as the different maps that I've seen proposed, this is probably the most compact map. So, South Glendale has been included in it in the past, and if you look at this population right here, it's very similar in voting history, school districts, income levels, household types, minorities, this whole area right here. And you can see how Grant goes right up into this area right here. I mean, you could literally, I mean, I talked to folks in this area, and I grew up in that area. Northern is a very big boundary right there to have. I don't know if you guys can see it. Northern Avenue. Any further north is very different. So,
Is that what district would that be?
this is where the current district lines are right now, right here. Holliston is not part of our district. This western part of Phoenix is not. Over here is not. The old Glendale is. South Central Phoenix is. We actually lose the northeast portion of our district, and that's to try to help out with the goal of trying to really accommodate as many people as we can in this, but without the expense of our communities of interest. And then you have South Phoenix and Levine over here, and Guadalupe. Guadalupe has expressed adamantly that they want to stay together with South Phoenix, Levine, this area over here. Not just on the congressional side, but also I think in the legislative side.
So that's keeping Levine within 16, is that correct?
This is a congressional.
I'm sorry,
Congressional, yeah. And if you think about it, on this western
district or
congressional, on the western border over here, you have Avondale and an Indian reservation. And Levine and South Phoenix are very similar as far as you look at all the different demographics, income levels, all those type of things.
what's the farthest western street